All right, this is part 2 of this East Palestine video. By far, one of the most important videos on this channel. And make sure you watch part 1 before you watch part 2 is what I have to say. But if somehow you've come to this and are unaware of part 1, please find part 1. I'll leave a link in the description box below this video, or you can search for it. This is so amazing that there's so much information. I had to make 2 parts, and it is so amazing, and it is one of the most important videos on this channel. Make sure you watch it. These evacuations also point to the evacuation of the rapture, which is why the train derailed in Mississauga 7 minutes before midnight. The midnight cry in Matthew 25. So Jesus told a parable of the midnight cry in Matthew 25, chapter 25. And the cry at midnight is symbolism for the rapture. And evacuations are symbolism for the rapture. God's people being evacuated. For example, Noah and his family were evacuated in the ark. And it is said that the ark was lifted up high above the earth. And it is said that those that will be raptured from the Antichrist will fly in the sky, in the clouds. They'll meet Jesus in the clouds. This is also why Hazel McCallion, Hurricane Hazel, died 390 days before February 22nd, 2023, the date it is predicted that the sun will explode, or rather there will be an explosion on the surface of the sun that will cause catastrophic power outages, and also the eruption of Yellowstone volcano. And this connection between Hurricane Hazel McCallion and the predicted explosion on the surface of the sun is relevant because Hazel McCallion is explosion symbolism, because of course she was the mayor during the bomb train explosion in Mississauga, which in turn connects prophetically, as I explained in other videos, with 13 weeks, and anyway, it's explained in other videos, but it connects to the date of the rapture, May 26th, 2024. But this 390 days connection is prophetic because not only does 390 days, is it a major important prophetic number of days in the prophecy in Ezekiel chapter 4, but also the 390th word in Strong's Greek New Testament Concordance is the word return, which the Apostle James used when he quoted Amos 9:11, the prophet Amos in the Old Testament, 9:11, when God said that he would return to rebuild his temple, which is referring to the end times, the second coming. And so that's why this is relevant, because the second coming will be at the rapture. Okay, so the evacuation of East Palestine also hints at the eastward exodus from Goshen to the Promised Land. East Palestine is on a river, and it's on the border. So that's also hinting at, the crossing of the Red Sea and the crossing of the Jordan River, the border of the Promised Land. So that's also why East Palestine. Because when the Hebrews crossed into the Promised Land, they were crossing from east of Palestine, if you will. And so anyway, yeah, all of this is symbolism for the rapture. There's one more prophetic aspect of Obama's prophetic speech at this prophetic state dinner, which is when he cracked a joke about how Senator Ted Cruz was running for president and had been born in Calgary. As you'll see, Obama is somewhat uncomfortable as he says this. And this is because, he knows the biggest lie in all of history is that he was born in the US and not in Kenya. But that's explained in other videos. One thing too here is that it's prophetic that this senator's name is Cruz, which is Spanish for cross. And the point here is that Obama is making a joke about someone running for president that wasn't born in the US, and he wasn't born in the US. In other words, God designed the circumstances of Senator Ted Cruz's life, who was born in Calgary, and ran for president at this time of the state dinner here in order for this prophetic sign in this extremely prophetic state dinner.
In both of our countries. And we see this in our current presidential campaign. After all, where else could a boy born in Calgary grow up to run for President of the United States?
I think I want to emphasize one thing before moving on here. I want to emphasize how important Bill 101 is. So Hazel McCallion died at the age of 101, a prophetic 1,656 hours before it is predicted that the dirty bomb will explode in Manhattan, causing the evacuation of Manhattan Island. And Hurricane Hazel McCallion was the mayor at the beginning of her tenure as mayor during the mass evacuation of Mississauga due to a train derailment and the explosion and the release of toxic gas. So, but Bill 101 is also tying into this story about Obama and the Nixon prophecy and Justin Trudeau, who enacted the Emergency Act, because 1976, which is when the Quebec Party, the Separatist Party, came into power in Quebec, which led to the exodus of Montreal, they enacted Bill 101, which was these oppressive minority laws, which paralleled, as I said, the oppressive minority laws in Egypt when the Jews were slaves to the king of Egypt. And this story in the Bible, in the book of Exodus, regards these oppressive laws that the Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, passed regarding the minority Hebrews. In other words, they were oppressive minority laws, just like Bill 101. So that's a parallel with the Bible there, this Bill 101, right? But the Bill 101, more importantly, is also pointing to, like I was talking about, how people will not be able to buy or sell food. This civil war that is leading to, because it's all politics, including COVID, it's all politics. And the thing is really, whether it's recognized consciously or not, it's used as a weapon to persecute their enemy, which is true Christians, conservative Christians, their arch enemy, the godless left's arch enemy, true conservative Christians. And it's a way of separating them, like Nazi Germany, like the stars on the armband, right, for the Jews. First it was, you can't go to the movies, you can't eat at the restaurant, just like during CVD disease hysteria. But it's leading to, of course, genocide. Of course. That's another subject, which I explain in the absolute must-watch trucker prophecy video, the trucker convoy prophecy video. And make sure you watch that video. I hesitate to say the most important video because, this one is too, but make sure you watch that video. One of the most important videos, the trucker convoy prophecy video. But anyway, Bill 101 is hinting at these upcoming laws, like Nazi laws, that separate the society into two camps, and the untouchables, the degenerates, the ones, the deplorables, as Hillary Clinton put it. So anyway, that's what's happening. So Bill 101 is about the same thing. It's oppressive minority laws. That's what's coming. That's the huge significance of Bill 101 in all of this. This is what it's all about, actually, this Bill 101. The mass evacuation of Manhattan, it's all leading to the mark of the Antichrist, described in Bible prophecy. That's what I'm talking about. The mark of the Antichrist will be these laws enacted on those that refuse to take the thing that you can't talk about, and as a consequence, will not be able to buy or sell food, the rationed food that will be rationed, well, for reasons including the upcoming solar storm that I mentioned a minute ago and the eruption of Yellowstone volcano. But regardless, the food will be rationed, and it will be for a digital programmable currency will enforce this. It will be only for those that have agreed to take the thing. And so that's what Bill 101 is all pointing to, including the Emergency Act, which is the stripping of bank accounts, which is the way in which people will not be able to buy food. It'll all be regulated through digital currency, and it'll all be set up that sellers and buyers won't be able to do that. They will not be allowed to buy and sell food. And make no mistake, the purpose of this prediction from God is to prove this. It is to prove what I have just said. One of the purposes for this prediction is to establish that the main conclusions being stated in this video are fact. That is the purpose for this prediction. Therefore, there is no debate regarding the information that I will be presenting. If there were to continue to be a debate on the information I will be presenting, there is no purpose for the prediction. In other words, the information is controversial, but that is the reason for the prediction, to end the controversy. It is a serious warning for those that disagree with the things being stated in this video. And to not appreciate this is to miss entirely the point of this prediction that is from God, and it is to miss the point of this video and video channel. This is how prophecy works. This is how God proves things. This is why 1/3 of the Bible is prophecy, in order to prove that it is the Word of God. Jesus said to those that doubted him, if they didn't believe what he had said, then they should believe the works. They should believe the healings and miracles that Jesus did. In the description box below, I will leave a link to the video titled God's Purpose for These Predictions. Okay, continuing on with the emails that I wrote. I forgot to mention that Montreal is French for Royal Mount, Mount Royal, which hints at the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. This is the reason for the prophetic signs in Montreal involving Obama, including another prophetic dinner he had with Justin Trudeau in Montreal, which is explained in other videos. Pharaoh in Egypt, a type for the Antichrist, persecuted the Hebrews out of Goshen in Egypt. Obama will persecute God's people and rule the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Also, Bill 101 is symbolism for the mark of the beast laws that Obama and Justin Trudeau will enforce. Again, this also ties to Pierre Trudeau and the Nixon prophecy. And these two Trudeaus enacted the emergency powers that also symbolize the mark of the beast laws. So that's what I was just explaining a minute ago. Again, this Bill 101 is the huge significance of all of this. The oppressive French language laws, which are unparalleled in any other quote-unquote free world country and nation in the world. Another reason why Hazel died at 101 and Bill 101 is that 101 hints at 11, and 11 is the 9/11 number. As I explained before, Flight 11 with a crew of 11 that flew into the Twin Towers looked like a giant 11. This is why there were 81 deaths in Hurricane Hazel, and Hazel McCallion died at 101 years old. So as I explained before, Hazel McCallion, her nickname is Hurricane Hazel, and I explained before how the 81 deaths hinted at 9 times 9, and 9 divided by 11 is 0.818181. So 81 is the 9/11 number. And she also died at the age of 101, which hints at 11, which is a 9/11 number. Also, the 110 stories hints at 11, the Twin Towers. One reason why the name Mississauga is intimidating to pronounce for someone new is that it is 11 letters long. This was designed by God to point to the number 11. Because 11 is God's execution of judgment number, it hints at Genesis 11, the Tower of Babel, which is Toronto, and more connection to Hazel, because Toronto is Mississauga, at 101 years. And 11 is the 9/11 number. New York City is also 11 letters. The reason why God pointed to Mississauga through Obama, Trudeau, the state dinner, is to connect Mississauga, which is 11 letters, to New York City, which is 11 letters. 370 weeks earlier, before the predicted dirty bomb explosion that will lead to the mass evacuation of Manhattan Island, which connects to Montreal Island, the evacuation and exodus from Montreal Island. We have Mississauga, Manhattan, and Montreal Island and Manhattan Island. Oh, okay, so this was a discovery here. This train derailment in East Palestine, it's called a bomb train. It isn't just a term invented after the incident in East Palestine. There were many people that were predicting that there would be these events because of the lack of safety regulation in the railroad industry and the corruption of the railroad companies cutting back and laying people off. And people were warning that there were going to be these events, these derailments of train cars carrying toxic substances in residential neighborhoods, because the trains go through residential neighborhoods, and it was only a matter of time before this would happen. And so they called them bomb trains waiting to happen. And that's what happened. It was an explosion in East Palestine, and it was a bomb train, just like the train that derailed in Mississauga. Same thing, residential neighborhood, a true bomb explosion. It was a 5,000 feet high explosion in Mississauga. And this hints at the dirty bomb. Bomb trains hint at dirty bomb. It's astounding. The bomb trains release the toxic gas and the toxic chemicals, which is what a dirty bomb is. It's a conventional bomb with dirty nuclear material, with radioactive waste that renders the area uninhabitable, which leads to a mass evacuation, just like train derailments, just like bomb trains. It's astounding. God used bomb trains to point to the bomb, the nuclear dirty bomb in Manhattan. All right, 4 times 4 days, which hints at the 44th president, after Hazel McCallion died, Hurricane Hazel, she was honored on February 14th, 2023, as a quote-unquote force of nature at her funeral. The Prime Minister of the 44th Parliament, the 23rd Prime Minister, which is why 4 times 4 days. Okay, the Prime Minister of the 44th Parliament, who during the 44th Parliament enacted the Emergency Act, spoke and called Hazel McCallion a force of nature 4 times 4 days after she died, and her nickname is Hurricane Hazel, because of the hurricane that was a force of nature. And believe me, the Prime Minister didn't know that he was saying that when he said that. He called her a force of nature because she was the mayor, until 2014. She died 9 years later. So she was the mayor up until she was 84 years old. Oh, if I don't mention it later, I might as well mention it now. She would have been the mayor until she was 84, and that's an Obama number, because Obama was born on the date 8/4. That's why God uses the number 84 in his prophetic signs. Also, the symbolic 7 years of the Antichrist's rule, which we are already well inside, by the way, which began in 2017. And the purpose of this prediction is to prove this, if you've raised an eyebrow because you know some things about Bible prophecy. The second coming is in 2024. But 7 years is 84 months. And that's another reason why 84. And the date 8/4 is the 216th day of the calendar year, and 216 is 6 times 6 times 6, which is the number of the Antichrist. So anyway, the Prime Minister of the 44th Parliament, 4 times 4 days, which hints at 44, called Hurricane Hazel a force of nature. But it was because of her longevity and how she was going strong at the age of 84. And she continued to be a civil servant up until when she died. She was on the board of directors for the biggest airport in Canada, for example. And I forget other things. But anyway, she didn't exactly retire at the age of 84. But when I chuckle, it's not because I'm laughing at Hazel McCallion. It's really because the truth is that this is from God. God designed Hazel McCallion's life for all of this. In Ontario, Hurricane Hazel is honored every February 14th because it is her birthday. Okay, so get this. She died at 101 years old. 4 times 4 days later, she died 4 times 4 days before her 102nd birthday. And Hazel McCallion, which hints at the number 12. 102 hints at the number 12. Take away the 0. That's how God does it. And Hazel McCallion served 12 consecutive terms as mayor. That's also astounding. So the day she was called a force of nature was on her 102nd birthday. I'm sure that's got to be. This is by God. I mean, I don't know, but maybe they said, her birthday's almost coming up. Why don't we have her funeral on that day? I don't know. Or maybe not. Maybe that just happened to be, right? But whatever the case is, it happened on her 102nd birthday, which hints at the number 12, and she served 12 terms. And it was 4 times 4 days after, and she was called a force of nature. And it was, anyway, you got it. It was on her birthday. And this also hints at the 11th hour of daylight going into the 12th hour of darkness. Jesus coined the phrase the 11th hour, and which points to the number 11 in the 9/11 events. Again, we've already established the number 11 with Hazel McCallion because she died at the age of 101, and her association with Bill 101, which led to the exodus to her city from Montreal to Mississauga. And so we have 101, which hints at 11, but we also have her prophetic funeral on her 102nd birthday, which hints at 12, and she served 12 terms, which confirms the fact that 102 hints at 12. And so we have 11 and 12 with Hazel McCallion, which hints at the 11th hour going into the 12th hour. God has demonstrated many 11th hour going into the 12th hour signs. I won't get into them. They're explained in other videos. And the reason, again, for that is because 9/11 was an 11th hour going into the 12th hour sign, as I explained earlier. Flight 11 with a crew of 11 that hit the Twin Towers looked like a giant 11 in New York State, the 11th state to join the Union in a city, New York City, that has 11 letters, etc. And the reason for all that is because Jesus coined the phrase the 11th hour, which referred to the last hour of daylight before darkness in ancient Israel. And the 9/11 events was a last chance, time is running out. In English, it's an idiom that means last chance, time is running out before judgment, destruction on the nation. So that's why Hazel McCallion 11 and 12 here. On the day of her state funeral that was attended by 3,000 people, I'm forgetting all this stuff. I haven't read it in a while. Wow. So her funeral was attended by 3,000 people, and on 9/11, it was about 3,000, unquote, souls that perished. Okay, the reason why it was, so the official number of deaths on 9/11 was 2,996. 2,996 souls is almost 3,000. And that's because after their rebellion at Mount Sinai, speaking of Egypt, because McCallion is all about Egypt, right? The exodus out of Montreal parallels the exodus from Egypt. And the exodus from Montreal went to Mississauga, and that's why Mississauga became so populated at the beginning, and starting at the beginning of her tenure as mayor, the 7th most populous city. She was called the Queen of Sprawl because her city expanded well after the invention of the automobile. And so there's no real downtown core to Mississauga. It's just big sprawl. It's a huge city. But anyway, getting back to it, she's Hazel McCallion. She's named after the Hurricane Hazel. And there were 81 deaths. And as I explained, that's a 9/11 number. And so she's associated with 9/11 for that reason. But also at her funeral, there were 3,000 people. And on 9/11, it was about 3,000 that died. After their rebellion in judgment, they died at Mount Sinai. Okay, and on the day of her state funeral, February 14th, 2023, and it was a state funeral, by the way. It was that they gave her a funeral as if she was a former important prime minister. But on the day of her state funeral, was another dangerous chemical spill incident. This was, this is amazing. It's more confirmation of Hazel McCallion, Mississauga, the train derailment, okay? Because she's Miss Mississauga, right? She's Mrs. Mississauga, Hazel McCallion. And that's because she began her tenure at the time of the train derailment. She was the heroic mayor that fractured her ankle during the emergency crisis, and she was the one that ordered the evacuation, etc., right? So she's the one, right? And she brings us all the way up to 2023 through her prophetic death, okay? Now, on the day of her state funeral, just so we could confirm it, you would think that God would do a sign on that day. He did. And it was another evacuation sign and another toxic spill sign, coincidentally. On the day of, and so what it was in Arizona, this semi-truck, residents crashed, and residents in the area were told to shelter in place. The incident occurred in the 48th state and closed down the I-10 highway. I-10, God has used before to hint at 110, the 110 stories on 9/11, and Joshua, who died at 110. The book of Joshua, 3 sets of 7, walls of security, collapsing in judgment, right? Joshua died at the 110, which is also 11 symbolism. And McCallion died at the age of 101, which is 11 symbolism. And McCallion is associated with Bill 101 because her city became populated after the exodus from Montreal Island due to the oppressive minority laws in Bill 101. This incident, this one in Arizona now, occurred 11 days after the train derailment in East Palestine. So the toxic spill in Arizona, that was somewhat of an evacuation too, because residents were told to shelter in place. The highway was closed down. It was evacuated. And this was 11 days, and 11 is the number for execution of judgment and Tower of Babel, which is Toronto and everything, right? Genesis 11. And like I explained earlier, it is now understood further the significance of the number 11 here and Bill 101 and Hazel McCallion dying at 101. And again, as I explained, it is a hint at the 101 passengers that were on the Mayflower, and also the 11 ships of John Winthrop's flotilla when he gave his speech before they disembarked and entered their version of the Promised Land. They saw it as a parallel with the Hebrews crossing into the Promised Land. And his speech regarded the promises of blessings and curses in Deuteronomy 28. And this is, to be very specific, what God is pointing to with this connection here that I'm explaining, this 11 days connection, but in general, these numbers that symbolize 11, including 101. This was 11 days after the train derailment in East Palestine. The two of them are separated by 11 days. This incident was in the 48th state and was 4 times 4 days after the death of McCallion. The spill in Arizona was nitric acid. It was in Tucson. Oh, by the way, I used to live in Tucson, and I lived there for a few years. More confirmation that all of this video was designed for me to make. I mean, I know that stretch of the I-10 highway very well. And so that's where it happened. On the day of the death of the funeral of the mayor, that was mayor, when I was in Mississauga during the evacuation, my first memory. And again, if I didn't mention, the 48th president will be Barack Obama, who was the 44th president. This funeral, this incident in the 48th state, the 48th president will be Obama, who was the 44th president. And this incident, this toxic spill in the 48th state, was 4 times on the day of her funeral, was 4 times 4 days after she died. Who was mayor during the emergency evacuation due to a train derailment and toxic gas. All right, to summarize here and to be very clear and to emphasize, Hazel McCallion is about Bill 101. She died at at the age of 101, and this hints at 11. And she died, and as I'm saying, the East Palestine train derailment is a prophetic sign that points to the Mississauga train derailment. And that's why she died, Hazel McCallion, who is all about the number 11 here. She died, or her state funeral, her prophetic state funeral, on the day of this toxic spill, which is prophetic and confirms the prophetic significance of the date of her funeral, because Hazel McCallion is all about the toxic spill with the Mississauga train derailment. And this toxic spill on the day of her funeral was on the I-10 highway. It closed down a section of the I-10 highway, which hints at 110 and therefore the number 11. In other words, God designed this toxic spill on the I-10 highway to hint at Hazel McCallion, who died at the age of 101, which hints at 11. This toxic spill that closed down the I-10 highway on the day of the funeral for the 101-year-old Hazel McCallion was 11 days after the East Palestine train derailment, which is absolutely astounding confirmation that Hazel McCallion is the purpose of the East Palestine train derailment. Or rather, it's all part of a big picture that's also pointing to the dirty bomb explosion in Manhattan in the 11th state, where the 110 stories collapsed on 9/11, hence the I-10 highway, and on and on. But you get my point here. It's all a big picture, and this is confirmation that Hazel McCallion and Mississauga and the train derailment are a big part of this because of, ultimately, Bill 101, which is symbolism for the Antichrist laws. And Bill 101 ties into Pierre Trudeau, Justin Trudeau's father, the Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau, who enacted the War Measures Act because of these same Quebec separatists, the extremists of that movement, and the terrorism that they were doing. And that obviously ties into his son, the only other prime minister to enact such a law, which is the Emergencies Act, which, as I have explained, is symbolism for what is coming and the Antichrist oppressive minority laws and the mark of the Antichrist. One other connection here that's very plain to see is that God is pointing to domestic terrorism, because Pierre Trudeau enacted the War Measures Act due to the domestic terrorism, which is tied into this big picture, as I've been explaining, through Bill 101 and the Quebec French separatists, which ties into his son, who also enacted such a law in response to the truckers, which I'm sure many in his half of the Civil War considered to be domestic terrorists. But somehow what will happen with the dirty bomb in Manhattan will be converted into the Civil War and the left's war on true conservatives and true Christians, who will be deemed and made to be out to be domestic terrorists, as if that isn't already happening with the things that happened in January of 2000 and you-know-what, for example, at the you-know-what building in the you-know-what Capitol. That's all that is. It's a political witch hunt to persecute and to make the enemy through propaganda and fear to be made out to be domestic terrorists. That's, in other words, why Pierre Trudeau gets tied into all of this, including with the Richard Nixon prophecy, which is again what I was explaining earlier, is that the reason why God brought in Pierre Trudeau and Richard Nixon and the prophecy was because Richard Nixon is known for weaponizing the federal government to persecute his political opponents. That's what will be happening here, what is happening currently, right now. Furthermore, it was in the 48th state on the date of her funeral, and it was 4 times 4 days after her death, and Barack Obama is the 44th president, who will be the 48th president. And somehow this predicted dirty bomb explosion, which is what these 2 train derailments are pointing to, these 2 train bombs, bomb trains, somehow the dirty bomb explosion will lead to the rise of the Antichrist. It will be a part of this process that will make Barack Obama president again. Another confirmation connection as well is that The day that Hazel McCallion died, again, is 4 times 4 days, which hints at the 44th president, before the date of her prophetic funeral on the day of this toxic spill in the 48th state, and the 44th president will become the 48th president. But the date of Hazel McCallion's death, as I said earlier, is 1776 hours before the date it is predicted that the dirty bomb will explode in Manhattan, leading to the mass evacuation of Manhattan Island. And 1776 is obviously symbolic of America, but it is also 4 times 444, which hints at the 44th president and American Antichrist. But this 1776 hours is also 74 days. And now that I have explained enough, you perhaps will have the eyes to see, but God has confirmed it through his big picture of signs, that this 74 days hints at 7 plus 4 equals 11. And I just went through all of the profound connections involving the number 11 and Hazel McCallion. For one thing, she died at the age of 101, which hints at 11. And so that's why her death is 74 days, which hints at 11, to the date it is predicted, because she's all about the bomb train, to the date it is, and evacuation of Mississauga, to the date it is predicted of the dirty bomb explosion and the mass evacuation of Manhattan Island on April 13th, 2023. Yet another thing that confirms this and confirms interpreting 74 days in terms of a 7 and a 4, which add up to 11, is that the 7 and a 4 also hint at the date of the Declaration of Independence in 1776, July 4th, 7-4. And so 74 days, which hints at July 4th, is also 1776 hours, which is stunning confirmation designed by God. That this is all what I'm saying is the intention of this. In fact, this is huge. One of the reasons for why the number 1776 is in fact for this prediction. Because this predicted event, the dirty bomb explosion in Manhattan, will be the seminal event that symbolizes the walls of security collapsing in judgment on America, as promised and warned with the 9/11 judgment warning events in Manhattan. And 1776 and July 4th symbolize the founding of America, which was by God, God's hand on American history, and the relationship that America has had with God, God's Gentile nation, the only other nation in history other than Israel that was founded on a relationship with God. Some Canadians that will think of themselves as distinct and different than Americans, and in many cases morally superior to Americans, but this is their bigotry rooted in secularism and materialism, leftism. But make no mistake, Canada is also part of this founding of America. When the Pilgrims came over, they didn't divide into America and Canada. It was only with the Revolutionary War that there became such a distinction. And this is why this sign involving Canada, Hazel McCallion, it's part of the same thing. God's hand on North American history. I will also add that the reason why the left hates America is truthfully rooted in spiritual hate for God. That's the truth behind that, all of this. All right, now, again, this video was originally produced before April 13th, and we can see here this connection from these signs on February 14th, Hazel McCallion's prophetic funeral, and this toxic gas spill that is for the purpose of aligning everything here. Again, it connects, as I just explained, to April 13th. However, now it is known that the follow-up judgment to the 9/11 warning in Lower Manhattan will be the predicted dirty bomb, and it is predicted to be on September 25th. In other words, what I'm saying is that the trail of signs led on further after April 13th, and the signs that occurred on April 13th are explained in the must-watch 54th Massachusetts Regiment video. And the analysis for this connection, for example, right here, but all of the other ones as well, are confirmed to be 100% correct, because this is how God's big picture of signs works. It's a trail of signs, and the signs on April 13th were clear and relevant to what we are talking about, which is the predicted dirty bomb explosion. Well, anyway, now it is known that it is September 25th, the date that is predicted for the dirty bomb. And this is astounding right here, because that date is 223 days after this February 14th date, which includes the sign in the 48th state with this toxic spill and the shutdown of the I-10 highway. And again, on 9/11, it was 110 stories that fell and collapsed on 9/11. And again, Hazel McCallion died at age of 101, which is a hint at 110. And again, this is 11 days after the EAST Palestine bomb train. So anyway, the reason why this is amazing is because this is, as I've been explaining, this is all about Obama. And that's why this happened in the 48th state, because Barack Obama will become the 48th president. And from this sign in the 48th state on February 14th, it is 223 days to the date of the predicted dirty bomb explosion. And 223 is the 48th prime number. And God uses this, God works like this in his big picture of signs. If you haven't come across this in a video already, it's probably because you haven't watched many videos, because it's all over the place. In other words, what I'm saying is that I understand God's big picture of signs very, very well, and he uses numbers to symbolize other numbers through their prime numbers. So 223 is the 48th prime number, and this connects to the 48th state, and that is an amazing confirmation. Also, 223 days is, in fact, exactly 32 weeks, and God uses the number 32 to hint at the 48th president, because 32 is 4 times 8, which hints at 48. And also, the 48th president will become the president in 2023, and 2023 hints at 223, which is the 48th prime number. On the same day as the funeral of Hurricane Hazel and the toxic gas incident on the highway I-10 in the 48th state, in Tucson, where I lived for about 4 years, making this another confirmation that my life was set up for this, an exhibit of the Obama presidency opened. Steve Fletcher discovered some astounding numbers that confirm this is an important sign. I assume that its importance is tied to the McCallion funeral and the incident in the 48th state. In other words, the purpose of this Obama exhibit sign is to confirm the significance of Obama in these events on February 14th that are pointing to the dirty bomb in and evacuation of Manhattan. All right, this Hofstra University's 13th presidential conference on the administration of Barack Obama includes an exhibition at the Hofstra University Museum of Art featuring photographs, facsimile documents, editorial cartoons, and objects on loan from the Barack Obama Presidential Library, National Archives, and Records Administration. It opened on this February 14th date. So this ties Obama to it. Remember, Obama said he had been to Mississauga 3 times. This is the day of the funeral of the mayor from Mississauga. It's this 13th presidential conference, and that's relevant too because the number 13 is symbolism for the Antichrist. Again, Nimrod, a type for the Antichrist at the Tower of Babel, was the 13th generation from Ham. Haman, another type for the Antichrist, persecuted the Jews on the 2 13th days of the month. And the 2 Antichrists are described in the book of Revelation in chapter 13. Also, when Barack Obama was a state senator in Illinois, he represented the 13th district of Chicago. And the number 13 symbolizes America. the founding of America, the nation was founded with 13 colonies. America was founded with 13 colonies on the date 7/4 in 1776, and this 13th presidential conference was 1776 hours before the prophetic signs on April 13th, which is, or was, 74 days. And so there you go. This toxic spill in the 48th state, 4 times 4 days after the death of Hurricane Hazel, the mayor of Mississauga, and 11 days after the train derailment in East Palestine. Thank you to Steve Fletcher for pointing this prophetic sign out. Okay, continuing what I wrote before, I didn't make it clear. 2/14, February 14th, is Hazel McCallion Day in Ontario. Her funeral happened to be on Hazel McCallion Day. A film was released last year named White Noise. It takes place in Ohio in the early 1980s, and the plot is a train derailment and evacuation of a small town in Ohio. This isn't a coincidence. The reason this film takes place in the early 1980s is because it hints at the train derailment in 1979 in Mississauga. Period. This coincidence is not due to some mysterious Luciferian CIA agents, etc. There is an enormous movement on social media to attribute things like this to a supposed Luciferian conspiracy, but I will refrain from critiquing this and the root of this incorrect worldview. I did a little bit at the beginning of this video. Not only this, though, but some of the extras, some of the cast, the extras in the movie are from East Palestine. So, again, this film was released named White Noise, and it takes place in Ohio, right near East Palestine in the early 1980s, and some of the extras in the movie are from East Palestine. And the movie is about, the movie is about a train derailment and evacuation, and 1979 is essentially the early 80s. And that's the train derailment in Mississauga that this is pointing to, as I've been explaining. So the prophetic numbers that confirm this. First of all, what I didn't know at the time that I wrote this email, which I just learned, is that God uses official trailer release dates in his big picture of signs for prophetic movies that he's using to develop his big picture. The official release date of this trailer for this movie, White Noise, was November, for Netflix, was November 22nd, 2022. And this is 84 days before the prophetic funeral of Hazel McCallion. And that was the same day as the toxic spill on the I-10 highway in the 48th state, which we were just talking about. Now, 84 days is, again, I think I explained earlier, a number that identifies Barack Obama. Also, as I mentioned, 84 months is 7 years, and that in Bible prophecy is symbolic of the period of the Antichrist's rule. But 84 days is 12 weeks. And the reason why that's confirmation is because, again, the prophetic funeral was on Hazel McCallion's 102nd birthday by coincidence, and 102 hints at 12. And she served for 12 terms, which is why she had a state funeral. She had been the mayor forever, 12 terms, 36 years. And so that's why 12 is confirmation. We have this prophetic 12 weeks, 84 days connection between the official release date of the White Noise trailer to the date of the funeral and the toxic spill in Arizona. Also, 12 weeks is 2,016 hours, and 2,016 hours hints at 216. And Barack Obama, who was born on the date 8/4, the date 8/4 is the 216th day in the calendar year, and 216 is 6 times 6 times 6, which is the number of the Antichrist in Bible prophecy. And the Antichrist will be the 48th president, which is why this toxic spill in the 48th state, 2016 hours after the official release date of this trailer for the movie White Noise. One of the days of filming came after the rest of the filming, and that was on November 4th, 2021. If you will recall, I was talking about the date 11/4 earlier. This was the day that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was elected in 2015, exactly 7 years after the date 11/4 in 2008, when Obama was elected. But 11/4 in 2021 was also extremely prophetic and was predicted ahead of time to be so. An extremely prophetic day of signs was 11/4 2021. This is another one added to them on this date. The other signs on 11/4 2024 confirm this sign on 11/4 2021. They filmed on the Hope Memorial Bridge in Cleveland, the only day of filming in Cleveland. Cleveland reveals Obama. God uses the city of Cleveland to point to Obama. Briefly, President Cleveland was the only president to serve non-consecutive terms. Just like Barack Obama will serve non-consecutive terms, he will skip the 45th presidency. Cleveland skipped the 23rd presidency. The 23rd presidency is 23 is the ninth prime number. 45 is the ninth triangular number. The number 9 symbolizes God's judgment. The 23rd presidency was the presidency of Benjamin Harrison, which hints at Kamala Harris, who, after she dies in a plane crash, will lead to Barack Obama as her replacement and become the president again and the Antichrist. President Benjamin Harrison was the 23rd president and that's why Barack Obama wore jersey number 23, the basketball president, when he played basketball in high school. All right, that's just scratching the surface though, because there's also the GOAT of basketball, LeBron James, who played for Cleveland and wore jersey number 23, and on and on. Okay. The date 11/4, as I said earlier, hints at 11 times 4 equals 44, equals the 44th president and Obama. Christ is the bridge of hope between man and God. This was 1,260 hours. Again, the number 1,260 occurs 7 times in Bible prophecy and is related to the period of the Antichrist. This filming in Cleveland was 1,260 hours before the predicted dirty bomb explosion and evacuation in Manhattan. Again, this movie, White Noise, is about a bomb train, a train derailment and toxic gas, and about an evacuation, an explosion and an evacuation, which hints at the dirty bomb explosion and evacuation of Manhattan Island. 1,260 hours is 75 weeks, which is also 17 months and 9 days, a pairing of 17 and 9 that points to Obama, who was president from 2009 until 2017, as I mentioned earlier. And this is a second witness that confirms the signs and connections. This filming of the movie White Noise on the Bridge of Hope in Cleveland was exactly 42 years, and 1,260 days is 42 months. Again, this period is the period of the end times, symbolically, and the Antichrist. So this filming was exactly 42 years after the Iranian hostage crisis, which is also known as the 444-day hostage crisis, because it lasted exactly 444 days, because the Antichrist is the 44th president. That's why the 42-month or years connection from the hostage crisis. And the 444-day hostage crisis began on the date 11/4, which hints at 11 times 4 equals 44. The Iranian hostage crisis, or the 444-day hostage crisis, began exactly 220 months. And again, 220 is the symbolizes rock, which symbolizes Jesus, and also 2 times 110 stories on 9/11. The beginning of the 444-day hostage crisis, the Iranian hostage crisis, an enemy of America, which is symbolic of judgment on America, was exactly 220 months after the Russian submarine K-19 nuclear incident. There was a movie made about this incident starring Harrison Ford and Liam Neeson. The K-19 ended up receiving the nickname Hiroshima. This incident occurred on July 4th, 1961, America's birthday, 1 month before the Antichrist's birthday, when he was born in 1961, 31 days afterward. And the Antichrist is described in the book of Isaiah chapter 31. And that incident was in turn exactly 2,220 months after July 4th in 1776. And 1776 is 4 times 444. Through the 9/11 events, God pointed to Washington, George Washington, as I explained earlier, who was born on the date 222, which is why this connects to the dirty bomb in Manhattan, because God pointed to the 9/11 events in order to point to George Washington, who marched down Wall Street and consecrated the nation to God inside Trinity Chapel, saying that if the nation were to ever turn away from God, it would lose its divine protection and blessings, which is what a nuclear or a dirty bomb explosion in Manhattan will be, a loss of divine protection from God. And so let's just summarize that again. From the founding of the country, which involves George Washington, it is exactly 2,220 months, which hints at George Washington, to the date of the K-19 nuclear incident, the submarine nuclear accident, which was a big deal. And the submarine was attempted to be rescued by Americans, but they refused. America was involved at the time in the incident. And Russia is a symbolic enemy, and that's what the losing of the protection, the blessings of America is. The symbolic enemies attack America, just like in ancient Israel, when Israel was warned in Isaiah 9:11, which was the daily reading on the date 9/11 in 2001. And so anyway, from the Russian nuclear accident, which is hinting at the nuclear material and the dirty bomb, it is exactly 220 months to the Iranian hostage, the 444-day hostage crisis, which is in turn exactly 42 years, which hints at 1,260 days, to the filming on the Hope Bridge in Cleveland and the other prophetic signs on that day, which are very important, which I won't get into. And in turn, that day is 1,260 hours to the date it is predicted that a dirty bomb will explode in Manhattan. So that's an amazing connection from the founding of America to the date of the dirty bomb explosion. I could make a separate video and title it something, like the founding of America prophecy or something. All right, now, once again, this video was originally produced before April 13th, and this 1,260 hours connection is to April 13th. And again, April 13th, the prophetic signs that occurred on that date confirm all of the analysis to be 100% correct. And if you don't believe that, fair enough. But when the prediction comes to pass, that will prove it. Because April 13th is leading to September 25th. And so when the prediction comes to pass on September 25th, it will prove that this 1,260 hours to April 13th was 100% valid and correct. All right, that's how it works. So, but the thing is, now that more has been learned, so much more has been learned, it's so amazing. The filming, the prophetic filming, the one-day only filming after the rest of the movie had been filmed in Cleveland on this Hope Bridge, which makes it so prophetic. Furthermore, the date that it occurred, November 4th, 2021, was what I call a super date for prophetic signs. It's not just a regular date with some sign on it. You know, for example, the Hazel McCallion date, that's a regular date, her funeral date, and the sign on in the 48th state with the closing of the I-10 highway. Just for example, that's important, but it's not like in the league of what happened on November 4th, 2021. I just can't get into it here. It's explained in other videos anyway. But the point is that this isn't just any old date. This is a super date. And so from this super date, or rather on this super date, we have this prophetic sign involving the filming of white noise in the city of Cleveland on the bridge. So, and furthermore, Cleveland is symbolized by the number 23, as I explained, and the date 11/4, which was the date that they filmed in Cleveland, hints at 11 times 4 equals 44. And God pairs 23 and 44 together to confirm the signs and connections. And this is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works. It works on the principle of second and third multiple witnesses confirming a matter, as the Bible says is required, and that's what makes what is being explained on this channel true, and not a product of one's imagination, and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. And one simple way in which he would provide second witnesses is through pairing certain numbers together, specific numbers, not every number, just certain ones, rare ones. And these include pairings of 23 and 44 because the Antichrist, the 44th president, was the basketball president who wore jersey number 23 when he played basketball in high school and will become the president again in 2023. And again, furthermore, skipped the 45th presidency, just like President Cleveland skipped the 23rd presidency, and on and on. So that's a pairing of 23 and 44 is my point. So I wanted to just emphasize once again that this is very important, this date. And we have this white noise train bomb, train derailment, evacuation, prophetic sign on this date. Okay. It turns out that this prophetic date, with all of these other signs as well, but including this white noise sign, which is, again, part of the trail that's leading to the predicted dirty bomb in Manhattan and the evacuation of Manhattan Island, that date is 690 days. 11/4/2021 is 690 days exactly to September 25th, 2023. And that, for me, because I know, is extremely profound. God, this isn't by far the only instance of 690 days as a connection, but the reason why that's very, very important is because it hints at the 69 weeks. 690 hints at 69, but we were talking about a period of time, and in the most central prophecy in the Bible, the 70 weeks prophecy, it is broken into a period of 69 weeks, followed by the last 70th week, which is symbolic of the end times period of the Antichrist. And so 69 weeks or 690 days in God's signs is symbolic of the beginning of the end times. And so that's why from 11/4/2021, it is 690 days. From the white noise filming in Cleveland, it is 690 days to the predicted dirty bomb explosion in Manhattan. That is a wow, jaw-dropping connection. But it gets even more amazing, okay, because that white noise, this wasn't known before. That white noise prophetic date with the filming in Cleveland 23, the date 44, pairing of 23-44, that is 40 days exactly after the train derailment in Montana on September 25th, 2021. You will probably recall this train derailment. It was an Amtrak train. It wasn't just a freight train. It was an Amtrak train, a passenger train that derailed in Montana. There were 3 deaths and 49 people were injured. 49 is another number in that most central prophecy that involves the 69 weeks period. But there was 49 injured, and 3 deaths. That's important, as I will explain here. But 40 days is also important because in the account of Noah's flood, the flood judgment, the flood waters increased for 40 days. And so that's why these 2 train derailment signs, because the white noise filming is about a train derailment. That's the plot of the movie. And it connects with 40 days to this actual train derailment, which wasn't just any train derailment. It was an Amtrak train, which furthermore symbolizes America. AM stands for America Track. It's a federal quasi-governmental organization, right? And so, okay, so that's why that's relevant. Now, the train derailment in Montana, there's lots to this. The reason for its specific location, the deeper meaning in the train derailment in Montana, it's first of all to supply more confirmation to the white noise sign, which in turn, as I just explained, connects to the dirty bomb explosion that's predicted to occur on September 25th. That's part of, because again, train derailments are part of this theme of bomb train signs, which, as I've explained, are part of the theme of a trail of signs that are leading to the prediction of the dirty bomb explosion and evacuation in Manhattan. That's one reason for the Amtrak train derailment there. But another reason that's embedded in this sign is its specific location. Part of the story was its location. I mean, it was 2 miles outside of this town, Joplin in Montana, kind of a remote area of the country. That's why it was significant. Regardless if there's a train derailment, the location is going to be important. But this was, if arguably a little bit more of the case, because it was in a remote area in rural nowhere land, right? And so anyway, because Joplin is a very small town in Montana, and there's no major highways. There's just one highway. I think maybe it's a U.S. highway, but anyway. So the point is that the location is the key, and it lies on the 110th longitudinal line. That's the key. It's on the 110th longitudinal line, which again is part of this theme of 110 and 101. And the number 11 connecting to the 11 ships of John Winthrop's and his speech that regarded Deuteronomy 28 and God's promises of blessings and curses, and the follow-up judgment to the 9/11 judgment, which is also about the number 11 because number 9 symbolizes God's judgment, and the number 11 symbolizes the execution of God's judgment and his promises of curses and destruction after the nation turns away from God. And so that's, and the reason why this is important though also is that Yellowstone caldera lies on the 110th longitudinal line. Yellowstone caldera is on the 110th longitudinal line and the 44th latitudinal line. That's the coordinates for the Yellowstone caldera. That's amazing because, of course, the Antichrist is the 44th president and 110 stories on 9/11, etc. But that's what God is pointing to with the train derailment on the same longitudinal line. Not only that, but the latitudinal line of the train derailment is the 48th latitudinal line. The 44th president will be the 48th president. And that's why Yellowstone caldera and the location of the train derailment are 44 and 110 and 48 and 110. Those are the coordinates of it. Furthermore, it's actually, the train derailment was 110.48 degrees. and 48.333. Now, I don't know how the coordinates work, but it's 33 and 3. So I just call it 0.33, if you will. That's all that matters, because the reason why that's relevant is because there were 3 deaths. And so the 3 deaths in the train derailment is actually confirmation of the GPS coordinate, 48.333. And, okay, so the point is, though, that this sign isn't only pointing to the predicted bomb explosion and evacuation in Manhattan, but this train derailment in Montana is also pointing to the eruption of Yellowstone volcano on the same longitudinal line. And that is predicted to be on February 24th, 2024. And what confirms that is amazing, which is the following, is that the date of the train derailment on Montana on the same longitudinal line is exactly 126 weeks to the predicted eruption of Yellowstone volcano. And 126 is a number God frequently uses to symbolize 1260, which is again a number mentioned 7 times in Bible prophecy regarding the end times and the period of the Antichrist. And again, the latitudinal lines of Yellowstone and the train derailment hint at the Antichrist, the 44th and 48th president. And so that's an astounding confirmation there. And so also on the train, there was a crew of 16 people. 16 people of the passengers were crew, and 16 is a number God uses to hint at 4 times 4 and the 44th president. And Yellowstone caldera on the 44th latitudinal line. Also, the train derailment in Montana on September 25th, 2021, not only connects to the predicted dirty bomb explosion with 40 days followed by 690 days, with the white noise movie filming in Cleveland in between, but also it connects directly with 8 plus 8 plus 8 months. Because September 25th, 2021 is exactly 2 years, which is 24 months, which is 8 plus 8 plus 8 months. And that hints at the number 888, which is the numeric value of the name Jesus in Greek. Greek letters are also numbers, just like Roman letters. And the equivalent numeric value of the name Jesus in Greek is 888. And that's why this exact 8 plus 8 plus 8 months connection between the train derailment, which is again part of this theme of bomb trains and train derailments and evacuations, to the predicted dirty bomb in Manhattan. Not only that, though, but this 8 plus 8 plus 8 months is also exactly 730 days. And 730 days hints at 3 sets of 7. That's why there were 49 injured. That's hinting at 7 times 7. Also, the Antichrist will come about through the death of the 49th vice president, when she will crash on her trip across America, just like this train was traveling with passengers across America. But the 49, which hints at 7 times 7, is also confirmation of the 730 days exact connection between the train derailment and the predicted bomb explosion in Manhattan, because 730 hints at 3 sets of 7, 7 and 3. And that's a theme God uses in his big picture of signs, 3 sets of 7, because when the Hebrews took the promised land, they marched around the walls of security of the ancient city of Jericho in a symbolic 3 sets of 7. They marched for 7 days, once per day, and then on the 7th day, 7 times, while 7 priests blew 7 trumpets. On 7 times 7. 7 times while 7 priests blew 7 trumpets. That's a 7 and 7, and it was preceded by 7 days, once per day. 3 sets of 7. But also, they were led by Joshua, who died at the age of 110. And this 730 days connection begins with this prophetic sign on the 110th longitudinal line. And it connects to the symbolic dropping of the walls of security that was warned of on 9/11 in Manhattan. The predicted dirty bomb explosion will be the follow-up to that, but that's what God was warning of on 9/11, the removal of the divine protection and blessings, the walls of security. The walls of security collapsed on Jericho in God's judgment after the Hebrews marched around them in a symbolic 3 sets of 7. And so that's amazing. From the train derailment in Montana, we have the 730 days connection. And this 730 days connection is also confirmed with the actual sign itself, with the 3 deaths and 7 times 7 injured. 3 deaths and 7 times 7 injured hints at 3 sets of 7. Residents of East Palestine were extras in the movie White Noise, which was filmed nearby. The release date of the movie on November 25th, 2022 is 200,160 minutes to the predicted dirty bomb in Manhattan, which hints at 216, which is 6 times 6 times 6. 200,160 minutes is also 3,336 hours, which in my opinion hints at G 336, the 336th word in Strong's Greek New Testament Concordance, which is the word for to be put to death, murder, in the dirty bomb event, in other words. White Noise, the release of it, on November 25th, 2022, was also exactly 70 days before the train derailment in East Palestine, which is why the current governor, Mike DeWine, is the 70th governor of Ohio. DeWine was also the 50th Attorney General of Ohio. 70 plus 50 equals 120 equals Noah's flood. God gave Noah the number 120 regarding the evacuation and judgment on the land with the timing of the flood. Mike DeWine, was also a U.S. representative from the 7th District of the 17th state, Ohio. The flood began in Genesis 7:17 and ended on the 17th day of the 7th month. The ark was raised up high above the earth in Genesis 7:17, and the flood ended, in other words, the evacuation, and the flood ended on the 17th day of the 7th month. And 17 is the 7th prime number. So that's why Mike DeWine, another confirmation of the prophetic significance of Mike DeWine, was the representative from the 7th district in the 17th state. Those numbers go together. He was also the 70th governor of Ohio, and the 70th week in this most central prophecy in the Bible, which symbolizes the period of the Antichrist's rule, will involve the Antichrist in Jerusalem on the Temple Mount, for which East Palestine hints at. Also, the Temple Mount is in East Jerusalem, the old city, which is why the train derailment in East Palestine was 70 days after the release of this movie, White Noise. That, obviously, we now know is a prophetic sign from God and is not a Luciferian conspiracy. 70 and 50, again, Mike DeWine was the 70th governor and the 50th attorney general, are both numbers that symbolize the restoration of Israel. And this incident was in East Palestine. It was an evacuation of East Palestine, which, as explained, points to the exodus of Montreal Island, which parallels the exodus in the Bible. In Exodus 3:14, God told Moses to tell the people that his name is I am. The symbol for I am in Hebrew is the exact same symbol for the symbol pi. And pi is 3:14. And so God said his name is I am in Exodus 3:14, and the symbol is the same symbol for pi, which is 3:14. Which is why the train derailment in East Palestine was 70 days after the release of White Noise, and the train derailment in East Palestine is 3 months and 14 days before it is predicted that Israel will bomb Iran's nuclear facilities on May 17th, 2023. That's another prediction. There's more to Mike DeWine, which I think I explain in a minute. But one thing that I recall that I don't know if I included in the emails that I wrote over a month ago is that DeWine seems to also hint at divine. That would be the name, the reason for the surname DeWine. It's hinting at divine, which is further confirmation that these numbers surrounding Mike DeWine are prophetic. They're divine. And also divine, this governor DeWine, he was quite involved with the East Palestine story, right? He was there, for example, drinking the water in front of the residents, saying to prove that it was safe. And he was the one that said, I don't recommend drinking the water before that. And he was the one, I think he said, I wouldn't return now, but then he told them to return and all that, right? He's very much a part of the story of East Palestine. And he has these prophetic numbers involved with him and his history. In his history with Washington, D.C., for that matter, right? Because this East Palestine incident isn't just, a judgment for Ohio. It's a national judgment, prophetic sign about America's walls of security collapsing and the dirty bomb in Manhattan, etc., and the rise of the Antichrist in Washington, D.C., for that matter. Okay, here is the video from the Obama-Trudeau-Nixon prophecy state dinner. So I'll just play the clip where he says what he says.
Before I ever became president, when we celebrated my sister and Conrad's marriage, Michelle and I took our daughters to Canada. And we went to Burlington, and this is always tough. Mississauga. And then we went to Toronto and Niagara Falls. Mississauga. I can do that.
Obama was in Burlington and Mississauga, and then Toronto and Niagara Falls in 2003. 2003 hints at 23. And Obama was the basketball president that wore jersey number 23 when he played basketball in high school. The East Palestine train derailment hints at the train derailment in Mississauga, and it occurred on the date 2/3 in 2023. The date 2/3, February 3rd in 2023, the East Palestine train derailment, hints at 23, and as does the year 2023. And this hints back to Obama and his remark regarding Mississauga in 2003, which also hints at 23. In other words, the date of the East Palestine train derailment on 2/3 is confirmation that it points to Mississauga and Obama, who ate at the Summit restaurant, Garden Restaurant in Mississauga in 2003. And a reminder, the Summit hints at the high place, which is the Hebrew word Bama. The basketball president wore jersey 23 in high school in Hawaii. He was in Mississauga in 2003 visiting his sister because he couldn't make her wedding in Hawaii when he was campaigning for the U.S. Senate. In other words, this was right before he rose to national power and fame. 2003 and the date 2/3 hint at 2 divided by 3 equals 0.666, the number of the Antichrist. The state dinner, in which he mentioned his visit to Mississauga in 2003, was with the 23rd Prime Minister, right after his election on 11/4, which hints at 11 times 4 equals 44, exactly 7 years after the election of the 44th president on the date 11/4. The 23rd Prime Minister would go on to mirror his father with the Emergency Act during the 44th Parliament. Obama, the basketball president who wore jersey 23, was the 44th president. Okay, further reading what I wrote to friends in the email thread. If you recall, I had wondered if there might be a prophetic sign on January 26th, as it hints at 1,260. The date 126 hints at 1,260. Sure enough, there was a sign. There are two local media outlets that broadcasted a story, an advertorial, regarding a pilot program for My ID in East Palestine. I'll just play a clip here of one of these advertorials.
East Palestine is known as the place to be. It's way ahead of the curve on a program to provide better treatment for anyone in the event of an emergency. I learned how it works and how it could help everyone in East Palestine. My ID provides quick medical information for emergency responders. Darlene Chapman is the outreach coordinator for this project, and she's an EMT.
If they're in a situation where they can't tell us or they don't have any family around, this is something that would make my life easier.
My ID works by taking a camera phone and pointing it at a QR code. It provides valuable medical information such as allergies, breathing difficulties, or other conditions, so you get proper treatment and care.
If anybody sees the QR code, you'll be able to scan this and get the information. So it helps that person not necessarily just here, but anywhere in the nation.
There are a few options for My ID: a bracelet, key fob, necklace, or attachment on your watch band. You can choose the one which fits your lifestyle best. That's up to you. Orders will start in January. The fire department has already collected $5,000 in donations to help.
That's our ultimate goal. We want to be able to give this for free to the citizens and provide them with that extra layer of care so that we can better treat them.
The offer includes Unity Township, which is served by the East Palestine Fire Department. These items cost around $20 each. You can even buy it for yourself. The fire department is hoping you'll be willing to wear it.
My goal is to have 100% of our residents and the citizens we serve in the township to have one of these and be working with them to make sure that we can treat them better and provide the best service that we can.
There's a 3-year plan to get My ID going across the village and make it available to all 4,700 residents.
Perhaps you noticed there was a repeated emphasis on all of the residents, every one of them getting one of these My ID things. Obviously, this sort of thing would only be useful theoretically for those that have a health condition or the elderly, and obviously all residents don't need one of these. And this isn't an accident. Whether they know it or not, they are perhaps unconsciously working for Satan. And this is because, as I will explain, this is related to the mark of the Antichrist. My ID is a wearable RFID and QR code that connects to a person's complete medical records and history. The My ID bracelets or necklaces, etc., were free for the first 250 customers. They are $20 each. 250 and 20 hints at 2,520, God's end times number in Bible prophecy, which is astounding because it confirms the 1,260 hinted at with the date 126. 2,520 is 2 times 1,260. And both of these numbers symbolize the end times period in Bible prophecy. So if you got that, the date hits at 1,260 and the wearable bracelet itself hints at 2,520. And these are the two numbers that symbolize the end times. The first day to receive the free wearable My ID and to sign up was on January 29th. This was the date that Hurricane Hazel McCallion, the mayor of Mississauga, died. So we have another connection between East Palestine and Mississauga and the train derailment. And again, the day that Hazel McCallion died is 74 days, which hints at July 4th, which is also 1776 hours before the date it is predicted that the dirty bomb will explode in Manhattan, leading to the mass evacuation of Manhattan Island. And therefore, this My ID bracelet program thing is also connected to the dirty bomb explosion in Manhattan. And again, as you will recall, the death of Hazel McCallion is 4 times 4 days, which hints at the 44th president before the date of her prophetic funeral and the toxic spill on the I-10 highway in the 48th state. And evacuation from the highway, and therefore this My ID program, prophetic sign in East Palestine, is also connected to this sign that points to the 44th president becoming the 48th president. There is an extreme coincidence in this article that I linked to in this email. In the article, there is a tweet regarding this My ID wearable story about East Palestine. If you look carefully, the tweet of the Amazon seller's listing for the My ID bracelet can be picked up for free at the Heartland Supercenter in Mississauga. What is going on here, I ask? What is going on here is that God is confirming for me that this is all from him and it's all designed, because there's no way. So we have this story that comes out on January 26th, and the date to pick it up, it's about the My ID bracelet, and the first day you can receive it for free, the initiation of the pilot program is on the 29th of January, the day that Hurricane Hazel McCallion, of the mayor of Mississauga, died. And there is this article that came out by visiontimes.com, an English international news website, but it's talking about the coincidence of the My ID bracelet program in East Palestine being introduced just shortly days before the East Palestine train derailment. And this article has in it a link to the Amazon seller for the My ID bracelet, who says you can pick it up for free at the Heartland Supercenter in Mississauga. This is Ontario, Canada. What is this? That's what a coincidence that this is this is doing in this article, in this My ID advertorial for East Palestine, and the promotion of this pilot program for East Palestine. It's absolutely astounding. Furthermore, if you caught that, you will have noticed how I emphasized Heartland, and you will have noticed the name Heartland if you're really getting what's going on here. Because, well, we're talking about the thing, right, that is giving people heart attacks and myocarditis, etc., and clogging people's arteries, etc., which is what I talked about earlier. And so that's why, and we talked about how people will not be able to buy or sell food unless they have taken the thing. And that will have to be enforced somehow digitally, which is what this My ID bracelet hints at, symbolizes. In fact, it is my opinion that it will be the My ID bracelet. That's what God was doing here. Okay, there's more. Okay, let me just continue to tie this all together. In other words, what I'm saying is that through the East Palestine train derailment, the bigger picture here, as I was saying earlier, it's about Bill 101 and the mark of the Antichrist, the oppressive laws. And God pointed to this pilot program for the My ID bracelet through the train derailment in East Palestine. Because first of all, what a coincidence. Like, it's just a matter of days afterward that the pilot program and the day that she died and the train derailment was right after the pilot program began. Okay, so let's continue. You will recall I was led to spend all of last Saturday and Sunday investigating prophetic signs and the history surrounding the Mississauga train derailment and evacuation, the biggest in North American history, one of my first memories from when I was 5 years old, which tied to the exodus of Montreal to Mississauga. It was after this research last weekend, late on Sunday night, that I first learned about the East Palestine train derailment. This is the coincidence of coincidences. And then it was learned that the East Palestine train derailment points to the Mississauga train derailment, and that both are pointing to the dirty bomb evacuation of Manhattan Island on March 13th, 2023. What I am saying is that it is a supernaturally designed coincidence that a My ID wearable located in Mississauga is found in this article about My ID wearables in East Palestine and the East Palestine train derailment. What does this mean? My ID is obviously symbolism for the mark of the beast. It may even be the actual method of enforcement for the mark of the beast. It would make sense that the elderly or poor without smartphones or anyone will be allowed to use my ID as a means to prove the person is up to date on their things. It seems likely to me that tattoos, embedded microchips, luciferase scanners, etc. are not necessary. That I believe those unnecessary technologies are could be likely designed by Satan to throw people off. People that are looking for ways to justify in their minds why the thing in its current form isn't the mark of the Antichrist, which it is, and it does not require some sort of additional technology to go with it to make it the mark of the Antichrist. But anyway, it could very well be that God has gone through great lengths with all that has been explained in this email thread and the train derailment in East Palestine to demonstrate that this My ID is the digital verification aspect of the mark of the beast. It may not be simply symbolism. After all, whatever is about to happen will happen extremely rapidly. The second coming of Jesus is in October of 2024, for example. My ID wearables could be implemented overnight. Tattoos, etc., probably not. Therefore, God turned the train over in East Palestine to point to this pilot program for My ID. This would be why Hurricane Hazel McCallion died on the same day as the My ID start date. Again, those in social media that don't know what to think about these types of coincidences because they don't understand what God is doing, his prophetic signs, nor his plan, will be saying that, like the white noise movie coincidence, Luciferian CIA agents are behind the My ID coincidence. This is incorrect. It is God that is behind this. The entire email thread is probably worth rereading. It is very important. If My ID is the vehicle for enforcement of the VACCINE passport, it would once again fool Christians that don't have the spiritual eyes to see what is going on and are still waiting for a physical mark on people's foreheads. In other words, it would seem to be perfect for deception if this were the goal. I'm thinking that it makes sense. Many Christians are expecting some sort of high tech for it to be the mark of the Antichrist. It already is the mark of the Antichrist in its current form. It's not about the enforcement mechanism anyway, but the My ID is high tech enough. Get your bracelet so that you can prove you've taken the mark. And regarding the Emergency Act and the bank account symbolism, somehow the digital mechanism, the My ID will somehow be connected to one's bank account. That's what will obviously happen. Continuing on with what I wrote, this is the right track. The train derailment is more than about pointing to the dirty bomb in Manhattan. It is also about Obama and the mark of the Antichrist. It was explained earlier how the Mississauga train derailment and evacuation connected to the predicted date of the dirty bomb and evacuation of Manhattan Island on April 13, 2023. This is through April 13th being 12,600 hours, which hints at 1,260, 42 months in Bible prophecy, the period of the Antichrist, after the white noise filming in Cleveland on 11/4/2021. I mentioned that 11/4/2021 is supremely important for signs, but didn't mention the signs on that date. It would take a half hour of typing, but the videos have repeatedly explained how 11/4/2021 is about the VACCINE. For example, it was the day that Biden announced the details of his VACCINE mandate for 84 million workers. This was the 13th anniversary of Obama's election in 11/4/2008. And 11/4 hints at 11 times 4 equals 44. And it was the 99th anniversary of the discovery of King Tut's tomb, Pharaoh, the Antichrist, symbolism, and was 9 months and 13 days after the home run king, player 44, Hank Aaron, died after taking the thing. He died and he's player 44. He died exactly 444 weeks after the Dark Knight Rises massacre, which in turn was exactly 42 months, Bible prophecy, Antichrist, after Obama's inauguration. The Dark Knight rose on January 20th, 2008. And his inauguration was exactly 1,260 years, which is again hinting at the 42 months and 1,260 days in Bible prophecy about the Antichrist. His inauguration was exactly 1,260 years after the biggest earthquake in Israel history, and on and on. Tens of thousands of people died. The movie White Noise and Biden's mandate on 11/4/2021. The filming, remember, it was filmed on that day, and the mandate on that day. So let me repeat that. It was the 99th anniversary of King Tut's tomb discovery and the 13th anniversary of Obama, and 9 months and 13 days after the home run king, as in the Antichrist King 44, died from taking the thing, and he died 6 + 6 + 6 days after taking the thing, but he also died exactly 444 weeks after the massacre, the Dark Knight Rises massacre, which hints at the massacre from taking the thing, which was exactly 42 months after the Dark Knight rose on the inauguration day, which was again exactly 1,260 years after the biggest earthquake in Israel's history. It's astounding beyond words. All right, if you caught that, I'll just repeat it again. This is a major coincidence that can't be a coincidence, and therefore it's a second witness that confirms that this is what is actually being demonstrated by God through his big picture of signs, patterns, and connections. This date, 11/4 in 2021, was the day of the details of the mandate for the thing. And it was exactly 13 years after Obama was first elected. And it was exactly 99 years after the discovery of King Tut's tomb in the Valley of Kings in Egypt. And in the Bible, Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, is a type, a foreshadow for the Antichrist, Barack Obama. So we have this 99 years and 13 years connection. 9 and 13. God pairs the numbers 9 and 13 together to confirm the signs and connections. Also, this date 11/4, which is all about the details of the thing mandate, was exactly 9 months and 13 days after the most famous death due to the thing, the home run king, Hank Aaron. And he died 6 + 6 + 6 days after he took the thing, which was on the very first day of the 117th Congress. And 9 times 13 equals 117. And this is the point. But it has now been learned why, or a major reason why God points to the number 117. It is because of what Robert F. Kennedy Jr. calls the most important speech in American history. And Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is a somewhat, if you will, like a prophet for God. He is God's voice, which is incidentally why he has an issue with his voice physically. It's symbolic of this. And the speech that he's talking about was the President Eisenhower's farewell speech that was delivered on the date 117, which hints at 117, on January 17th, 1961. This was exactly 30 years after the birth of James Earl Jones, another man God is using in his prophetic signs. James Earl Jones is king symbolism. He played King Jafar in the movie Coming to America. He was the voice of Mufasa, the Lion King. the voice of Darth Vader, which is Antichrist King symbolism, and James Earl Jones read the audio King James Bible. And in the Bible, 30 years is symbolic of a king. David and Joseph were made kings at the age of 30 years old, which is why exactly 30 years from the birth of James Earl Jones is very significant. That 30th anniversary of James Earl Jones is the day that Dwight Eisenhower delivered the most important speech in American history. Dwight Eisenhower was the only general, military general, that was also a president in the 20th century. And this speech is known for how Dwight Eisenhower warned of the military-industrial complex. And he also warned of elites and the capturing of science and the science industry and a form of government called technocracy. He warned of the military-industrial complex and technocracy. And this is exactly what we are going through right now. It's a coup d'etat, a war on democracy from the military-industrial complex and the technocrats and their followers in the political cult. So anyway, there's much more to be said about that, but also Barack Obama was born 199 days after this speech, and 199 hints at 19 and 9. And the number 9 is the most important number as it symbolizes God's judgment. And the number 19 also symbolizes God's judgment. It is 9 plus 10. And the number 10 is symbolism for God's perfect order. And so 9 and 10 hints at God's perfect judgment. That's why Barack Obama, the Antichrist that will be propped up and be the leader of this coup on democracy, was born 199 days after Dwight Eisenhower's speech. Dwight Eisenhower was the 34th president. Barack Obama first entered politics at the age of 34 years old. And he lived, the 44th president lived for 4 years, or grew up for 4 years in the country of Indonesia, which is made up of 34 provinces. And that's symbolic because like how America is made up of 50 states, it's symbolic of the country. And while Barack Obama was president, there was the Washington, D.C. earthquake, which caused $34 million in damages to the National Cathedral, otherwise known as America's spiritual home. And so anyway, that's why, because it's pointing to Dwight Eisenhower, the 34th president, and his speech. Now, there's much more to be said about this. Dwight Eisenhower gave this speech shortly after the closest and most controversial election in the 20th century between Richard Nixon and John F. Kennedy. And that election came down to 119,000 votes. And that number, 119, is symbolism or hints at 9/11. And the Republicans after this election cried foul. And you can see the parallel, obviously, with our modern time. And that modern time example is a result of the military-industrial complex that orchestrated the events that allowed the shenanigans, which will ultimately allow Barack Obama to become president again. But that election came down to 119,000 votes, and 11,009 days after that was the day that John F. Kennedy was assassinated by the military-industrial complex. Now, 1,109 days not only hints at 119,000 votes on the day that he was elected, John F. Kennedy, but God uses this number, 1,109, to hint at and pair 110 and 9 together because of the events of 9/11, which I explained in other videos, but the 110 stories collapsed, engendered a small earthquake, and cracked the foundation of Federal Hall on Wall Street, which symbolized the cracked foundation of America, which is God. And that's where George Washington was inaugurated, and he walked down Wall Street to Trinity Chapel to consecrate the nation to God. saying that if the nation were ever to turn away from God, it would lose its divine protection and blessings. Well, Wall Street, this march down Wall Street, was named after the 9-foot-high wall of security that the Dutch built to keep the British and the Indians out. And Joshua, who died at the age of 110, as in 110 stories, and led the Hebrews around the walls of security of Jericho before they collapsed in God's judgment, and the 110 stories of the Twin Towers collapsed in God's judgment. And so that's the connection between Wall Street and the collapse of the 110-story towers. It cracked the foundation with an earthquake of Federal Hall on Wall Street. Anyway, that's why God pairs 9 and 110 together. And 20 years later, on the anniversary, 20 years is symbolic of a perfect period of waiting in the Bible. This is symbolic of God's period of waiting for America to repent after the 9/11 judgment warning. And on that anniversary was the sudden collapse of the U.S. presence in Afghanistan. And the iconic image of that is the cargo plane with the Afghanis running after it, leaving the airport in Kabul. And the image of that, if you see on the side of it, is a big serial number. It is 1109, which hints at 110 and 9. And so anyway, John F. Kennedy was assassinated 1,109 days after the 119,000 vote controversial election, which is proof that the military-industrial complex assassinated John F. Kennedy, probably because they got him elected, but then didn't approve of what he was doing because John F. Kennedy was trying to fight corruption and the military-industrial complex. And so was his brother afterwards, who was also assassinated. And so anyway, there you have it there. And Barack Obama was born exactly 120 weeks before John F. Kennedy was assassinated. And there's more prophetic significance to that, but 120 is a number that symbolizes God's judgment. God gave Noah the number 120 and a period of time involving 120 years until the judgment destruction. I explained earlier how the filming of white noise, which ties to the East Palestine train derailment, obviously, and the other signs I just mentioned regarding the thing on the same date, 11/4/2021, including the mandate on that day, 84 million workers, which hints at Obama, who was born on the date 8/4, right? And I predicted that ahead in advance because it was 84 days after the prophetic sign, the Field of Dreams baseball game, but that's another story, but that also ties to Obama. But anyway, exactly 42 years back, if you recall, was the first day of the 444-day hostage crisis, the Iranian hostage crisis. But that day was exactly 188 weeks after Gerald Ford, the only president never to have been elected vice president or president, just like Barack Obama, Ford was appointed instead, just like Barack Obama will be appointed, and this is how he will overcome the restriction in the 22nd Amendment on someone from being elected to the office more than twice. He will be appointed instead. This Iranian hostage crisis was exactly 188 weeks, and again, 188 hints at the word woe in the Old Testament, in the Old Testament, exclamation mark, used in context of extreme judgment from God. The Iranian hostage crisis, which was extreme judgment from God, the 444-day hostage crisis, was exactly 188 weeks after Gerald Ford, which hints at Obama because he was unelected, announced his thing, VACCINE, program, every citizen in America, and that was on March 24th, 1976. And it connects profoundly to EAST Palestine and, as I just explained, the My ID bracelet and Bill 101 and the Emergency Act, which was, as I have been explaining, all about the mark of the Antichrist laws, which will be about, of course, the thing. And so Gerald Ford's announcement, it connects to the thing. jailed. So 1976 was like 2020. There was the big scare over, and Ford was compelled to make an announcement in his election year, re-election year, to make an announcement that his plan, just like Biden's plan, Ford had a national plan too. And Ford's national plan connects with 188 weeks and 42 years exactly to Biden's mandate. It's absolutely astounding, okay? Now, the date that he did that, which was March 24th, 1976, and by the way, just like CVD disease, the thing had to be, but they had more sense back then. They weren't in a mass formation. The thing had to be recalled because people were getting side effects, injuries. People were getting injured, and so the whole thing was scrapped. But, you know, it was just a scare anyway. There was no that was going to kill many thousands of people. And by the way, there is no such thing that could do that. The Spanish flu was not an influenza. It was not. It was a bacterial pneumonia. And that's a fact. And the one paper that the NIH has that says they supposedly discovered in an autopsy of someone that was buried in frozen tundra in Scandinavia, I think, that they've isolated the thing from Spanish flu in 1918. That paper is authored by Anthony Fauci, the biggest corrupt liar of history, whose name Fauci is in Italian means sickle, as in Revelation chapter 14, the angels sickle the harvest of the grapes that go into the winepress of God's wrath. That kind of sickle. Okay, anyway, the prediction being made in this video proves this. That's the purpose of this prediction, is to prove the controversial things that I'm explaining. That's why God has given me a voice through this prediction. The truth about Spanish flu is that it isn't a contagious influenza type. It's a bacteria pneumonia. Okay? Caused millions of deaths in 1918. It's not possible for such a thing to happen. And people know that. But that's why they needed to make the false paper about the supposed isolation from the frozen corpse in Scandinavia, because they needed to perpetuate their industry. It's all corruption. Okay? And that's proven with this prediction. That's the purpose of this prediction. Make no mistake. Now back to what I was saying. The whole thing had to be scrapped. Massive numbers of people were getting side effects. And anyway, this whole thing connects extremely profoundly to EAST Palestine and the MyID bracelet and Obama and the death of Hank Aaron, the home run king, player number 44. Okay? And Hank Aaron, player number 44, died 444 weeks after the Batman massacre. And Hank Aaron, in 4 years of his career, hit a total of 44 home runs. And he beat Babe Ruth's home run record by hitting a pitch off of pitcher number 44 in the fourth inning. And he tied Babe Ruth's record on the date 4-4. Okay. So, back to what I was saying here, what I wrote in the email thread here. Ford announced his program exactly 120 weeks after he became the 40th vice president. The 40 days of increasing floodwaters began 120 years after God told Noah he would destroy mankind. God gave Noah 120 years to the flood, and then the flood began with 40 days of increasing floodwaters. And the flood is just judgment symbolism, the destruction of God's people. Why? Because their Levi's jeans pants had been corrupted, as it says in the account, which is what the thing does. It's designed to corrupt. That's what that technology is. And that's why God is destroying mankind now. Understand? Follow? It's the end, just like the flood event end. And that's why Gerald Ford announced his thing exactly 120 weeks after he became the 40th vice president. So, Ford ascended to the White House during Watergate. The name Watergate hints at Noah's flood and the waters that burst forth. Watergate was about Nixon illegally weaponizing the federal government to persecute his political opponents, which is exactly what is happening now and will accelerate when the unelected Antichrist, just like Ford, retakes the White House in the left's civil war against their arch enemy, conservative Christians. And so it is now finally known the significance of Watergate in God's big picture of signs. Amazing. There's actually more to Watergate, which I'll explain in another video. Much more. And all of the information in this email thread will be proven to be true on April 13th when the prediction comes to pass. And by the way, Watergate hints at the flood, because the flood waters burst forth after the gates of the deep burst forth, and the gates flooded. First of all, judgment begins at the gates, symbolically in the Bible, okay? But the Watergate is hinting at the flood waters that burst forth from the deep when the floodgates opened, okay? That's what Watergate hints at. And that's why Ford was the 40th vice president exactly 120 weeks before his prophetic program for every citizen to be getting the thing. And again, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove this connection. It's to prove the connection between Gerald Ford and his thing mandate and how it is all a parallel with what we are going through right now, including Watergate and the weaponization of the federal government, etc. To prove everything that I'm saying. That's why God has given me a voice through this prediction. If you miss that, you miss entirely the point of this video and this prediction that is from God. The reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove this. The disaster in East Palestine occurred just before 9 a.m. on the date 2/3 in 2023, which is an astounding pairing of 9 and 23. God frequently pairs 9 and 23 together to confirm the signs and connections and to reveal the identity of the Antichrist, the basketball president that wore jersey number 23 and became president in 2009. Furthermore, God pairs 9 and 23 together to reveal the identity of the mark of the Antichrist, because the inverse of the mark of the Antichrist is described in Ezekiel chapter 9, and this mark of the Antichrist affects one's 23 chromosomes. And so that's why 9 and 23 also. Also, the GOAT of basketball, Michael Jordan, wore jersey 23, but when he played for the U.S. Olympic Dream Team, he wore jersey number 9, and that team scored an average of 44 points beats their opponents by an average of 44 points per game, which hints at the 44th president that was president in 2009 and wore jersey number 23, and on and on. The basketball president and GOAT Antichrist, who is from Chicago, hence the GOAT of basketball, who played for the Chicago Bulls. It was 11 rail cars carrying hazardous material that derailed. This is a pairing of 9 and 11 that hints at 9/11. And again, God confirms his signs and connections through second witnesses. It says in the Bible that a second and third witness is required to confirm a matter, and this is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works. It works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses that to confirm a matter, which is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination, and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. And the simplest way of providing second witnesses is through pairing certain numbers together, such as 9 and 23 and 9 and 11. And so the disaster occurred just before 9, and it was 11 rail cars that were carrying hazardous material that derailed. The wastewater that was used to put out the fire was and is being transported to a waste management facility in Harris County, Texas, which is Houston, the fourth biggest city in the U.S. God frequently uses prophetic signs in Harris County to point to Kamala Harris, the vehicle through which the Antichrist will rise to power after she dies in a plane crash. This is why this connection between East Palestine and Harris County. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. Jesus died for you. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Please leave a like and upvote the video. And once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know and more. Don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, TrumpPrediction.com.